Hello, everyone. And for my classroom observation one, I observed a ninth grade biology class. So, my driving question behind my research for observing this biology class was how many times and for how long did the teacher stop and go through a highly effective questioning pattern with her class? So, what is highly effective questioning as a strategy? Well, it is a strategy where teachers create short instructional segments that are devoted to questioning students. These questioning periods typically follow the introduction of content or other learning experiences. There are two important behavioral strategies that Hanel mentions with his highly effective questioning strategy. One is involuntary participation. So, if students are not really willing to answer questions or they don't really want to participate, you need to call on them anyways. That's a key part of this strategy. And number two is justifying their responses. You can't just answer the question. You need to be able to explain why. And so, as teachers, we need to be able to question the students and try to get more out of them and justify their answers rather than just stating the answer and moving on. So, my protocol for collecting data was I'm going to observe the ninth grade biology class and count the number of times the teacher stops and asks questions to the class or to a specific student. I'm also going to use a timer and measure the length of the time that the teacher spends questioning the class when she makes that stop and asks questions. And then I will analyze the number of times the teacher stops for questioning, measure the amount of time she spends in questioning periods, and compare that amount of time to the total time of the lesson to determine the percentage of class time she spends in questioning segments. So this chart shows how much time and how many stoppages we had. So this teacher for our biology lesson stopped class 12 times to ask questions to her class as a whole or to an individual student. The shortest amount of time she spent questioning was 12 seconds, and the highest amount was 40 seconds. The average time she spent questioning her students was 21 seconds. So within our 13-minute biology lesson, the teacher stopped class for 12 times to ask questions to the class or to a specific students which he called on. The total time that the teacher spent in questioning segments was 257 seconds, or 4.28 minutes out of the 13-minute lesson. This is equivalent to 33% of class time that she spent asking the students questions and trying to get them to justify their responses over the content that they had just learned or were preparing to learn. So this data shows us that most of the stoppages the teacher used were around 21 seconds in length. Some of her longer stoppages were for more in-depth questioning and scaffolding to try to get the students to justify their answers and get more out of them. This technique can work in smaller time frames rather than longer periods. I learned from this observation. Hunnell says that teachers who communicate well with students through questioning elevate their students' interest in learning and skill in understanding. The biology teacher that I observed with this lesson questioned the students very consistently throughout the lesson. She used this to check for understanding and to allow the students to reinforce what they had learned. She was constantly asking for feedback from the students to make sure that they all had gathered what they had just learned. She did a lot of questioning all throughout the 13 minutes, and it was clear that that constant questioning was keeping the students engaged. The teacher I observed did not use that entire 5 to 25-minute questioning period that Hanel suggests, but rather she broke it up into segments throughout her lesson. She still used 33% of her class time questioning, and she followed Hanel's pattern for that highly effective questioning, where she was taking main ideas, connecting them, and then having her students summarize what they had just learned. She also used both of Hanel's behavioral strategies, where she called upon students who weren't raising their hands and justified their answers. I can use this highly effective questioning strategy in my own science classes. I can question all throughout my classes as we go throughout our content, and I can have students identify key facts, compare and connect facts we have learned, and summarize them. I can also call on students, especially those who are unwilling to participate in volunteer answers, which is a critical part of this strategy, and I can show that I have the expectation for everyone to be willing to be engaged and willing to learn and share their understanding with me as a teacher.